Hi, I'm Christopher L. Bennett, author of Ex Machina, Orion's Hounds, and other fine Star Trek novels. You're listening to The Chronic Rift.
Now stay tuned for Dr. Johnny Fever and his radio show.
Welcome back, my friends, to an all-new episode of the Chronic Rift podcast. It's your old pal, John S. Drew here. It's September 3rd, 2016. I'm seeing the meme going around about how it's not the end of summer yet. End of summer is September 20th. It's the end of summer, folks. Let's put it this way. We're all going back to work. We're all going back to school. You can't convince me otherwise. I know that there are other places where school has already started and they still had summer, but my mentality, it's always been, this is it. Summer's over. We don't have it anymore like we used to have, the fall preview and such, where, with TV and such, nobody makes as big a deal about it. At least it seems that way. I don't know. I'm rambling. And I'm rambling because it is the Labor Day weekend. And I'm sitting here in the Chronic Rift studios by myself. Michael Faulkner is away at DragonCon. Chrissy Myers is away at Fan Expo in Canada. And if you get a chance, if you're at either convention, look them up. See if you can have a talk with them and such. Keith to Canada was supposed to join me, but the move that he's doing, he's moving from one place to another, new apartment and such, is taking longer than he expected. So the plans that we had for him and I to be together today sort of got scrapped. So what we're going to do, though, is I'm going to cheat. Keith will be here, just not live. What we've got is a bunch of panel discussions from last year's DragonCon, and since Keith and I couldn't go this year, this is also a way for us to sort of wallow in our pity by sharing these panels with you that we never got to do. So we're going to start with one on Klingon history. Now, as you may remember, Keith wrote the Klingon Art of War, which was published last year, and he was promoting it heavily at the convention. So being on this panel made a whole lot of sense. So we're going to get started first with the Klingon history, and then we're going to move on to a panel on themes from the TV show Supernatural. And we're going to run through them just straight through. So here we go with Klingon history from DragonCon 2015.
Figueroa. I am the director of a Star Trek charity group based out of Charleston, South Carolina. We have now gone regional. We are throughout the Southeast. It's called the Alliance, formerly known as Carolina Alliance of Star Trek Fans. And we do a lot of work throughout the Southeast. We do cosplay. We have a lot of fun. But primarily, our goals are to affect positive changes within our respective communities. And we do so. We kind of pattern ourselves after the 501st in that respect. And I've been a Klingon cosplayer for about a few years or so. Been watching Star Trek since '72, and I'm just glad to be here. And hopefully y'all will learn and have fun and get some good interaction with y'all this morning.
So like the 501st, only with better aim.
Absolutely, right. That's right, I kill at what I aim at.
Unless it's Kirk.
Right. Well.
Special dispensation on that one. My name is Morgan Skye, and I really don't know why I'm here. I just sat down and they didn't kick me out, so hey. I am the communications officer on Michaela's Revenge out of Charleston, which is, as far as we are aware, the only female Klingon ship in any fleet. I was also last year's Miss Klingon Empire, which,
I was one of the judges.
To be fair, though, I didn't really meet him until after the contest. Is that our official story?
That is our official story.
That's our official story. Okay. I've been
He's sticking to it.
That's right. I've been doing Klingon fun stuff for a couple years now, and so I feel very inadequate compared to these two.
Stop it. You're great.
I'm, as we said, Keith already handed out. I've written a metric buttload of Klingon fiction. Most recently, the Klingon Art of War, which is presented actually as a text within the Klingon Empire that was written by an unknown author shortly after the time of Kalis. This particular edition includes the original text of the Klingon Art of War, as well as modern commentary by a Klingon novelist named Karatak. This way, what Karatak does is illustrate the various precepts within the book using more modern examples. This way I could bring in stuff from the TV shows, from the movies, from the novels, from the comic books, plus, crap I made up. And to explicate the precepts and guide you in your life as a warrior. I've been joking that this is my first self-help book. And it was a lot of fun to do. I did a series of 4 novels that take place, actually, and a bunch more as well, that take place on a Klingon ship called the IKS Gorkon. Featuring Clag, who was a Klingon who Riker served with in A Matter of Honor, and Leader Wall is on it's her favorite character.
Every book he ever writes, it doesn't matter what it's about, it needs more wool.
Okay. Wall is in the Gorkon books. I had 2 perspectives. I had the perspective of the officers, the bridge crew and whatnot, but I also I focused on one of the. There's about 2,500 ground troops that serve on the Gorkon. And I focused on one 4-person squad, the 15th squad, led by Leader Wall, who is Morgan's favorite character.
Oh my God, there's this one part. Okay, all right, spoiler alerts.
Fangirl moment.
And again, I didn't read these until after I met him, and I'm like, oh, Klingon books, I guess I'll check those out. And then I'm like, I need more. Yeah. But there's this one, this is what got me, that made me fall in love with her. She does an in-house, they've been captured by blank people, trying not to spoil it for anybody.
Aliens, basically.
Aliens, yes.
She's been kidnapped by aliens.
Yes.
Kind of.
Stripped naked. She breaks out of jail, breaks everyone else out of jail, still naked, and is like, she's just like, bam, I hate you. Bam, we're doing this. Bam, I just saved your asses.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I love her. I want to be her. You just need to write a Wool book.
Okay.
Now.
Which
I'm
is
a little busy doing a panel. Can I wait?
No.
But that character does exemplify a lot of what we love about the Klingon race, about the unabashed, they're not cowards by nature, sometimes to the point of their own detriment, that it's not just about honor and power, but it's about being true to who and what we are. We are warlike, but we're also strong. And it's that strength, that inner strength that they're not afraid to show and carry upon their shoulders that I love about a lot of Keith's characters. It's not a caricature. We're not, Klingons aren't just aliens with ridgy foreheads and in some cases no rigid foreheads. But, and that's why this particular character that Mo was talking about, it really hits home why she does that. She doesn't care if she's naked. I'm a Klingon, I'm breaking out of jail. Yeah. That's all I got to do. And I'm breaking you out, and I'm going to kick your butt on my way out, and I'll get some gawk when I get back to the crib. That's how and that's what I love about it.
And Wall also is somebody who used to be part of a noble house. Right. But the noble house, she slept with the wrong guy.
Haven't we all done that?
Yeah. She was supposed to marry another...
Wait a minute, are the kids in here?
No, member of the nobility. Instead, but was in love with the guy who mucked the stables or whatever, and got kicked out of the house. And then the house wound up being disgraced because they chose the wrong side during a coup attempt, and so the house was basically dissolved and almost everyone was killed. So she wound up being the only person from that house to actually survive.
Wait, did you rip off Jane Austen?
A little bit. And
no,
it's like
Jane Austen ripped off.
And yes, and. So she wound up being the only person surviving in the house, and she basically pulled herself up. She wound up enlisting in the Defense Force as a grunt, and worked her way up to being a leader. And I actually established in a later novel, A Singular Destiny, that she worked her way up to Castavoy, which is the equivalent of a sergeant in charge of an entire squadron.
What an interesting character! You should write an entire book about her.
So I've heard. But there was one line in one particular episode. It was in Rightful Heir, which is the episode where they brought the clone of Kalis in on Next Generation.
Yeah.
There's one line that Worf quotes. It's from the Story of the Promise, which is the last thing Kalis said before he, ascended or rose or went away or traveled or turned into a big glowy ball of light or whatever it was he did. And he said, "You are Klingons. You need nobody but yourselves." That line right there sums up Klingons in one sentence in a lot of ways. Part of it is also why they have such, attitude toward other species. I remember Duras referring to Worf's uniform as a child's uniform, which I thought was pretty snotty. And but that's the Klingon attitude, because which is, you kind of need that if you're going to conquer people anyway. I mean, there wasn't a people on Earth more full of themselves than the Romans.
Yeah.
Just to give one example. The Roman Empire believed that they were basically better than everybody else, which is why it was their right to conquer all the other people, because they're Romans, damn it. And Klingons very much have that attitude that they don't need anybody else.
Mm-hmm. But you also see, that's an interesting parallel you just brought out about Earth's history of the Roman Empire and its eventual downfall. Yeah. In many ways, when you've seen the Klingons falter in Star Trek lore, be it even in the movies, but most notably in Next Generation, and definitely in the novelizations, which in a lot of times I say are better than quote-unquote canon in many respects, because it fleshes out. Besides, they're vetted anyway, so we love them. Is that myopia of we're just warlike creatures, and we're so good at it that we can conquer, and we should conquer, to the detriment of our personal and cultural growth. So they end up, there's this little rot on the inside of Klingon culture that ends up almost like a cancer and grows. And you see that in some of the stories, some of the episodes.
Also in the speech Ezri gave to Worf.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which I had occasional issues with the character of Ezri Dax, but that moment justified the character's existence, because that was a speech that only Ezri could give.
Right.
Ezri could only give it because she had Curzon's and Jadzia's knowledge of the Klingons,
right,
but not the affinity, so she had a little more perspective than the other two had. So she was the only one who could really give Worf that smack upside the head that he needed. And she was right. And one of the things we've been following up on in the novels that take place after DS9's finale is Martok's reign as Chancellor is trying to basically walk back the corruption that we saw with Duras, with Gowron, and the compromises made by the High Council. Starting. One of the things I love, Tacking Into the Wind is one of my favorite episodes of any Star Trek, and it's not one you can show somebody as an example of Star Trek because it builds on too much history. Because there's both Kira's plot and Worf's plot build on, in Worf's case, that was about 10 years worth of stories going back to Sins of the Father. That's basically one big-ass Klingon political storyline that started there and ended in Tacking Into the Wind. And it really, the corruption we saw in Sins of the Father initially, when they were willing to blame Worf's father for what happened out of a sense of convenience, really. Because honor and politics don't mix very well, as we've seen over and over again, both here and in Klingon. But and then the speech that Ezra gave, and the idea that Martok is somebody who can actually, because Martok's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's an awesome.
Is there anybody here who doesn't think Martok is awesome?
He's awesome.
Because if you do, you have to leave. Sorry.
He stays angry all the time.
Most of the time, yeah. But yeah, that's.
Klingons are very angry people.
Yes.
Yes,
Also,
I am.
Yes. Also, if you ever get a chance to meet J.G. Hertzler at a con, do it. He's awesome. Yes.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be in the panel with you.
Oh, thank you.
Second thing,
I'm just a guy, really.
after meeting JG a couple of times and having multiple drinks and hanging out with him, his character's almost like him.
Yeah, there's some bleed over there.
Including,
by the way, he's actually blind in that eye.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why he had no problem with them covering it up. It didn't actually affect him one way or the other. He was already blind in
I
that
actually
eye.
think the Klingons are more like Zulus, because there was a time when
That's a good idea.
said the Zulu name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember people would rather give this up to slavery.
There's-
Especially Shaka.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
There's the Klingons are an interesting combination. There's some Zulu in there. There's a lot of Vikings in there too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of samurai. There's a lot of Bushido code in there.
Yeah.
When I wrote the Klingon Art of War, I'm also a martial artist. I'm a secondary black belt in karate, and I worked a lot of martial arts philosophy in there because there's a lot of it in there. Both simple things like the Makbara, which is basically Tai Chi only. No, not only anything. It's Tai Chi. And, but there's a saying in martial arts which I actually used in here. It's in Japanese it's Nanakarobi Yaoki, which is usually translated as 7 times fall down, 8 times get up.
Yeah.
And I had the Klingon 1B 8 times fall down, 9 times get up because it's Klingons and it has to be bigger. But that's a very much a Klingon philosophy that you don't give up until you're dead,
Right.
and sometimes not even then.
Right.
Because at Star Trek nobody stays dead.
Matter of fact, over in
Except the
Iraq-
red shirt.
In Iraq, some of the companies named themselves Klingons in honor of.
Really?
That's how we were going to fight.
I did not know that. Awesome.
That way.
That doesn't surprise me really because we're getting there's a lot of geeks in the armed forces.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
One of the primary reasons why I love the idea of this panel too is that Klingons are one of the most recognizable aliens in any sci-fi franchise. They're one of the strongest in their presence, one because of their features, but also a lot of their armament, their armor. But another facet that I really thought was interesting for American audiences especially is this idea of they're warriors, they're not necessarily expendable, but they are kind of what we hope to be, ever strong in the face of certain adversity, definitely many times death. And when we run that parallel to certain warrior factions throughout our human history, African continent, the Romans and the early European,
Genghis Khan, for that matter.
Absolutely, Genghis Khan among the Mongols. We have in Japan, we have the classic warriors there. When you think back on the 48 years of Star Trek, I wonder as fans, where do you place Klingons in the hierarchy of not just aliens, but just as as characters of the franchise? Because humans are ever present. Because one, it's a human story, really at its core. But what is it for y'all? And I'm throwing it out at y'all. I know it's not Q&A time quite yet, but how do you feel about Klingons? I mean, you're here, and this is a larger number than I even thought would be here this morning. One, because it's Monday afternoon. And
What's wrong with you?
I know. Right? Most of you people should be still hungover trying to get your car, But
Don't be so sure they aren't.
Oh, that's true. But how do you feel?
There's a long line out there.
This gentleman right here.
Well, going back to the original series, I mean, the Klingons that we saw in the original series, they were basically the Snidely Whiplash of science fiction.
Right.
They're all, we're going to get hurt. Nothing against, the three actors that played Kane, Core, and Cole.
Right.
But they were kind of just a very one-dimensional villain.
Right.
Actually, just to interrupt you for one brief second, it is because I think of the quality of especially John Colicos and Michael Ansara that they rose above it.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
But you're right. They were written that way.
they were just they could have been just a one-shot villain, and nobody would give a flying tribble about them.
Yes.
40 years later.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just imagined a flying tribble and I got scared. Sorry. Go on.
The one thing I want to mention to people as well, because Klingons are so large, other franchises have actually used them as a reference point. Karen Travis is an example. When she was writing the Mandalorian trilogies, she's quoted for saying that she used the mythologies of the Klingons as a reference point to try and build upon, because the Mandalorians are a warlike race like the Klingons.
For that matter, Dargo on Farscape, his initially he was very aware of part of what Rockney wanted to do there was make it look like that, and then it turns out he's not like that at all, and then it was a facade because what he really wanted to be was a farmer. But that was one of the things he wanted to do was play with that trope because it was a common enough one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the popularity of Klingons.
My point being that they went from being very one-dimensional,
Right.
very on the surface, to now 45 years later, they're probably one of the most intricate and detailed.
Absolutely.
And studied. I mean, fictional cultures that's ever been around. I mean, you can get books and uniforms and
That's right.
pajamas, and there's a language camp, and you can study in college. I mean, just the fact that this made up race has become so ingrained in our culture, the American culture, the world culture. I mean, it's kind of amazing when you think about it that 40 years ago, what do we call them? Oh, we'll call them the Klingons. What the heck?
It's interesting because it's evolved. The way it's evolved, and it's been all the little bits and pieces that have been added along that have added to the tapestry of it. It wasn't like they like Vulcans, for example, are probably arguably the only other one that would even from Star Trek would even considered as popular, and that was pretty much from jump because of what Spock was.
Well, I think.
But yeah, go ahead. No, talk.
It's hard to be the meek one up here. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I think.
Jump in there like a Klingon.
What do you say?
Hang on. All right, let me put this on first. All right. Funny enough, it doesn't fit unless I'm wearing my ridges. Because it's like, as soon as I put my ridges on, it just like snaps in. But without it, it just kind of wibbles. Anyway, I think honestly.
The last thing you want is a wibbly tiara.
I know, right? But I think honestly, if it hadn't been for the fact that they decided to make Worf a bridge officer, and some people may disagree, but if it wasn't for the fact that he was right there, right in front, I really don't think the Klingons would be where they are today, because by him being there, they were kind of forced. Like in original series, they're like, okay, we've got Spock, he's the only alien, I guess we kind of got to do something special because, he's an alien, and this is a space show. And
he was the second build. He was the second build lead, so there was going to eventually do something.
He was the only one who made it from the pilot, but he's like looking back like, haha, suckers. Anyway, but I think if it wasn't for Worf, it kind of forced them to do more. And I know when it comes to the movies, I'm not a huge fan of the movies, but oh my god, I will watch Undiscovered Country 50 times a week because
it's my favorite.
It
is my favorite. It is my favorite.
And one of the things, it's not my favorite, but I have reasons for that. But the Klingon stuff is great. I love the character of Gorkon, the characters of Gorkon, Azadbor, and Chang. They're all really, and Kurla for that matter. I didn't think he got enough credit.
How come she didn't cry when her dad died? She doesn't have tear ducts.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. See what you did?
Sorry.
Monday at DragonCon. No, I didn't know it. There were all the bits and pieces that were added on, including the language. The giving them a language in Star Trek 3 really, I think, did a lot toward expanding interest in them, I think, to some extent. Because that was something that people could latch onto, that an entire language had been created. And that made them a little more compelling as an existing culture as opposed to just a reflection of humanity as
But even in the
aliens.
earlier movies, though, there was still a very...
Well, Star Trek 3 was the first one they were really in.
I mean, I know, but it's like...
Aside from Mark Leonard's cameo at the beginning of the first one.
Yeah. But when you look at the earlier movies versus, we'll say TNG, it's so... It really is like they didn't even... I don't even think they really thought about anything past the, I'm going to kick your ass.
Yeah.
Because that's... I mean, even the looks, the models, the clothing, everything was very primal. And that was great. I loved it. But... I didn't really get attached to the characters or to the race and the species until much, much later when, you saw how they lived at their homeworld and, hey, we need help and we're not just, going to shoot you a lot.
Although I honestly think, I think is there anybody else? Is anybody else here, and then we'll get to your question, I promise. Does anybody else here actually like Krug and his crew from Star Trek 3? Okay, it's not just me. Good. I know so many people was like, "Oh, great, Reverend Jim is a Klingon," but I liked the dynamic, especially among Krug and Maltz and the other one.
Right.
The other one who he vaporized, actually John Larroquette was an awesome Klingon. He really was. He doesn't get nearly enough impressive. No. They built planets. Yeah, he was just so snide.
They need to do more with him.
Yeah. Especially since he's the only one who survived. He was the only one who survived. In fact, Mark Okran jokingly gave him credit for the Klingon dictionary because they captured him after. But but the language, and then, yeah, making. And the funny thing is, Worf was not supposed to be a regular character on Next Gen. He was a last-minute add-on, and originally he was supposed to just be an extra.
Right.
You know, just basically being a Klingon standing on the bridge just to show that the Klingons are their allies now. But it wasn't even supposed to be a speaking part. And he wound up of course, he wound up being one of the 3 major characters on the show as it developed. And because he's a regular, and just the same way that Spock being a regular got them to do more Vulcan stuff. Eventually, they did Heart of Glory. But then they did Sins of the Father, and then they just kept building on that from there. And that's where a lot of what we've learned about Klingon culture, and Star Trek VI wouldn't have happened without the stories they did on Next Gen, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, you had a question back. You. Words are hard, I know. It's Monday at DragonCon.
You said something about all of us being here at this time. If it had been any time other than now doing the con, the line would have been so long that we wouldn't have got
You have a point.
You raise an excellent point.
That's an excellent point. I wouldn't be here because I'd have been stuck at the Skye Bridge over at Teal trying to get here. So you're right. You're right.
No, right. The other thing about the Klingons in the classic series, everybody's going to throw stuff at me when I mention this, but the Klingons in that series were the kind of people that they are because they have too much DNA in them from Enterprise.
Hey, it was as good an explanation as any. I actually got to deal with that.
I like how they pull that history around
and
straighten that out, and the Klingons go.
Yeah, Enterprise got a raw deal with that. I'm with you.
Worf's explanation. It's something we don't speak about.
There's actually in the Klingon Art of War, I acknowledge what Enterprise established obliquely, but there's a bit where they talk about the augment virus, and there's a note, translator's note. The Klingon Empire would not allow us to include this in the translation because, and the only reason we were given is we do not discuss it with outsiders.
Right.
Figured, what the hell? Because I can see why they'd be embarrassed about it. And I thought it didn't need to necessarily be an entire 2-part episode, and I could have lived without seeing Scott Bakula squirming in a chair with ridges moving up and down his head. But that 2-part episode was as good an explanation as we were likely to get.
Right.
Plus, it also gave us Steve Avery as a Klingon, which we needed.
Right.
I think they just did it for a setup so that you could have the best Klingon insult ever. Your mother has a smooth forehead.
Yes.
That was.
But I actually got there's an anthology that Pocket put out in 2010 called 7 Deadly Sins. With each sin represented by a race or place in the Star Trek universe, and surprise, anger was Klingons, and I did a story involving Korkang and Koloth, and since by that point we knew about the whole augment virus thing and whatnot, I dealt with how those 3 who are of noble birth but have smooth heads, so they're in this kind of weird limbo because they have to be respected to some extent because of their bloodlines, but they're Kuchka, which was the term the Klingon Language Institute provided for what the smooth-headed ones look like. It means the unhappy ones. As opposed to Chemkuch, which are the ones with the ridges, and that means the proud forehead. I love that. But and what they have to deal with, they're only allowed, they can still be ship captains, but only of other smooth-headed Klingons. Right. And there's a whole question of whether they have, are even considered real Klingons and so on and so forth, which I thought was a handy way of explaining why one of the guys, working for Kor in Errand of Mercy, was such a craven jackass that it took Kirk threatening him for 2 seconds to give up intelligence. But the idea being that he's just a smoothhead, so he's not, nobody thinks he's going to behave honorably anyway, so why should he bother? And that's actually, now that they've established that, it's a perfect opportunity to deal with that sort of thing, which we can do in the novels, because, I don't think anybody else is going to deal with it at this point, because mostly people want to ignore it. Yeah, in the back. That's okay.
But, because in the original, they looked just kind of like swarthy Asian types, and then the ridges appeared. So, later on.
Well, they sat on the TV show Enterprise. Because in Enterprise we saw ridge-headed Klingons 100 years before Kirk.
Right.
So eventually, in the 4th season episode, they established that there was a virus that affected some Klingons.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to do experiments with DNA from the genetically engineered folks that worked with Khan. the eugenics wars. So it tied all that together. So that it was experiments trying to create superhuman Klingons. Didn't quite work. And
That's why you don't mess with perfection.
yes, and well, they wanted ones who were stronger. You know.
So you will find, so the series Enterprise tries to answer that. You know, it's always been that dark cloud over the entire franchise when dealing with Klingons. Why this, why that, and it's been talked about throughout the years.
And there have been so many theories.
Yeah, and a lot of theories, and then finally the writers of Enterprise said, "Look, this will be a great story arc. Let's just throw an explanation out there."
They're canceling us anyway.
Right,
pretty much.
And Keith said, Keith brought up a good point. I mean, if you really think about it, it would have continued to be this nebulous concept of why it happened. We needed an answer. If you're going to give us an answer, then give us an answer. And we could debate for years if it was a good or a bad one, but we have one. So Netflix, that son of a gun, then go ahead. And it is a very interesting story arc, not the best. I think Enterprise got a bad rap, people. You can kill me if you want. But I also enjoy Nemesis. So, hey, what do I know?
And Brent
I have
Spiner
nothing
did
to
do
say
a
to
really
any.
good job.
The episodes are called Affliction and Divergence, and if nothing else, as I said, it gave us Steve Avery as a Klingon, which should have been done years ago.
Right.
Because Steve Avery was pretty much born to play a Klingon. Also has John Schuck.
Yeah, John Schuck.
He played the Klingon ambassador in Star Trek 4 and 6.
He was,
and was also painless in the original MASH movie.
And it allowed Brent Spiner to do his crossover.
Right, and Brent Spiner did.
No, Brent Spiner wasn't in that one.
But he was in Enterprise.
It spun off of
right, but he was in
a story that he was in. But
Enterprise was great in that they obviously pulled from established canon and other series, but it's a prequel.
Yeah.
So, it kind of worked out great. But I did want to revisit just a second, I'll grab you. We talk about the warlike anger, but in Star Trek 3 and Y, I cosplay as Valkyris. I love her. She is exactly 4 minutes on screen. And I connected with that woman the first time I saw it when that movie first came out. I'm in my mid-40s now, and I still love her as a character. She no explanation of her other than what she did. Her aesthetics got me. But when Krug made that decision to kill her, for a split second, that actor shone, because you had to, if you watch it again, you will see how he changes his mannerisms.
Yes.
Because there is an emotional connection between Krug and Valkyris. No one ever talks about that because she's only on the screen for 4 minutes, but for 20 seconds, Chris Lloyd looks and you can just see it. He's like, I'm going to have to kill a woman that I love. And a lot of people just don't get it because it goes by so fleetingly. But there's a emotional component. They love each other. They marry each other. They love their children. But it's the armor. You think about the ridges, it's the armor that hides emotions. The armor that they wear hides their heart. But part of a Klingon group we have is that honor is in the heart. And they said, because we love so hard, but we can't show the universe that. But if you watch that movie again, watch Chris Lloyd's face. He doesn't even say anything. And then she knows, and they played it all. Of course, they're not right in front of each other. So that should tell you the actors themselves did it really well. How she looked back and she realized, I'm going to die. But his eyes said, I'm killing someone that I love.
It's interesting. I never interpreted it as somebody he loves. I saw the look, but the look when he realized, okay, this means I have to kill you now, and he felt bad about it. But I also got the feeling that in some ways I got the vibe that she read the data on purpose so that he would kill her.
That's interesting, because
which is, by the way, also the interpretation Vonda McIntyre went with when she novelized the film.
Right,
which may be where I got it from. I don't remember.
Well, and when I read the novelization too, I thought that was pretty interesting because I didn't get that. But then again, we see what we want to see when we watch these. Right, I can't say what's right or wrong. I can only say this is what I see.
And I do love that Lloyd did that.
No, gentleman, right there.
First.
I think you're both right.
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to ask the panel, my favorite Star Trek series is Voyager. It's my favorite one. And I wanted to know what the panel thought of B'Elanna Torres's contributing to the Klingon universe and what you guys think and how they did with her. I'm just curious what your guys' take on her character.
She was an interesting character. I think they missed a bet I think they should have done when that one episode where she was split into her human half and her Klingon half. We should have found out that it was actually her human half who was cranky. that her human half actually had a Latin temper. No offense, but
and I'm going to talk about it as soon as you're done why a B'Elanna meant something.
Her Klingon half was actually kind of calm. I think that would have been so cool. They totally missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, to feed that Latina stereotype.
But I also, we very rarely, we haven't seen that many Klingon engineers, so it was nice to see one.
Right, to see someone intellectually with intellectual prowess. Right, but what I loved, let me tell you why that character resonated with me. I'm biracial. So my mother and father are people of the 40s and 50s. In fact, they could not marry in her state. It was illegal for a mixed-race couple to marry. And so when I was born in New York, and then when I was younger, about 9, she moved us to South Carolina, which was a whole different world for me. Love the state, don't get me wrong, it's my home. But coming from a multicultural background and going to an area in the early 70s that was still racially divided, I didn't fit in any world. Black folks didn't know what to do with me. White folks, Hispanic, didn't know what to do with me. And so when I watched Voyager and I saw B'Elanna, and I'm an adult, I'm raising children by this point, so, you know, and they're multicultural as well by marriage, but I saw when there were a couple of episodes where she was conflicted. There was a time she hated her Klingon side because she was not accepted. And how she ended up, why party like all good juvenile delinquents ended up going to the Maquis. But, and that's why, so her contribution for me as a woman, a biracial woman, who had to navigate those waters during the late 60s and through the 70s, where we were so polarized racially, she's being pulled by intergalactic racially. I'm an alien and I'm a human and Keith hit it. I wanted the Latin in her to come out and kick someone's ass, and then the little Klingon be meek like, I'm just a Klingon, but I'm a Puerto Rican, baby, and I will get you back. And I was like, oh, no, that's the one stereotype they didn't want to feed into. But I was like, so, like I said, we see what we want to see, or maybe what we need to see, and that is the beauty of Star Trek. Unlike some other franchises, it's not myopic. It's not just about one race, one culture. It is every one of us, wealthy, poor, skinny, fat, highly educated, barely literate. If you watch this show in any of Incarnation and any of the aliens, although we talk about Klingons today, you will get something out of it. And for Klingons, and I'm glad y'all here today, for me, for B'Elanna, and the race itself, was I'm okay. And it actually gave me some closure, and I hate to say that. I was in my 30s, and part of my angst from a child was closed because I watched Star Trek Voyager. And you can take it for whatever you want, but it did that for me. It did that for me.
I'm only sorry that they didn't actually have her in a show that actually interacted with...
Right.
You know, I mean, basically she was with the same people all the time, and they generally, I mean, they didn't... Some of them liked her from the jump, others had to get to like her, and one of them got to marry her. But it would have been interesting to see what it would have been like for a half-human, half-Klingon person. Right. Oh, yeah, I mean, like, or like if K'Ehleyr had become a regular, you know.
Right.
K'Ehleyr is one of my absolute favorite characters ever.
Oh, yes.
And I was so, I mean, even though I think Reunion is one of the 10 best Star Trek episodes ever done, I hate the fact that they killed her off.
Yes.
Especially because it meant we got stuck with Alexander.
Hey, he was a baby.
Oh, it's not his fault, but I mean, all Alexander's presence did was just show that Worf is the worst father ever. But
truth.
I've been doing a rewatch. I did a Next Generation. I've been
It's
rewatching
so
Deep Space Nine for Tor.com. It appears twice a week. I just did You Are Cordially Invited, and my first thought was, yay, no more Alexander. But and watching it all in a row like that, really, I didn't realize just how incredibly crappy a father Worf was. I kind of knew intellectually, but watching, mainlining the episodes twice a week like that really drove home that,
Well, I think that's why he. I asked Deanna to be a godmother.
Yeah.
Because he's like, great, you take him.
Yeah. But you had a question.
Yeah. So does the smooth forehead theory support or explain that Klingon belief that Shakespeare was a Klingon?
Good. Yeah.
No, we're just arrogant that
Yeah,
way. We're just arrogant.
Original Shakespeare.
Klingon psychoses of the warlike superiority complex, and it's always puzzled me. What happens when we have to do menial labor? These menial labor Klingons, what do they do?
Okay,
They have castes.
that was something I was dealing
they have
with in
castes.
the Burning House,
That's
and in particular, there's an episode, Once More Into the Breach, that formally established this on screen, what was implied. Right. The warriors are the upper class.
Right.
They're the ones who get all the plum positions. They're the ones who I mean, most of the Klingons we've seen have been either military or politicians, and most of the politicians are military people who got, political positions. So that's the upper classes. They're not the ones who, and in most societies, the people in the upper class don't actually do any work.
Seems like a genetic drive in them.
Yeah, but I mean, it just means that the janitors the enemy they have to defeat is the dirt, and they have to clean it, and they must defeat the dirt, or they have brought shame upon.
It kind of looks like they're losing that.
Well, yes, that's the other thing. I mean, it's possible there isn't anybody. Have you seen the way they eat? Yes.
In one of your books, I believe you touched on how the Klingons looked at war and dying in battle was honorable.
Mm-hmm.
During the Dominion War and being in the military, you see they had to back off from that because Dominion can breed their soldiers like God knows what.
Yeah.
Federation of Klingons can't do that.
Right.
So they had to back off from that while keeping things honorable. Then the Borg came and wiped out a whole.
Right, because
That was in the Destiny
retreat is not in their lexicon until those. You're right when you start talking the Dominion War and the Borg, because we can't. You're right. You cannot. We cannot create these soldiers and warriors. So they had to learn when they worked with the Federation. How do we work collaboratively? Okay, thank you, Monday morning. And but the concept of retreat, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Why do we got to take a step back? I mean, even if it's not necessarily tactical, but it is tactical because we got to live to fight another day. We hear that in, American literature, live to fight another day. I never really saw that much in the Klingon lore. It was like, no, you fight today. And if you live, it's a good day, but you fight today. Right.
Yes. I've heard that.
Mark was a 9th Fleet commander.
Yeah.
He had Federation, so
It was a combined.
Right.
Yeah.
he couldn't treat that Federation captain the same way he treated that.
Right.
I would like to see that have been touched upon more, because it would have been interesting to see how a Klingon commander treated a Starfleet captain.
Especially given that the Federation and Starfleet had been at war, the Federation and the Klingons had been in a state of war just like a year earlier.
Right.
Yes. That would have been interesting to see how that was touched.
We didn't deal with it much. I put together an anthology in 2004 called Tales of the Dominion War, where
what I really liked in DS9 is how they touched upon the Klingon and Romulan relationship and how they managed to get over that for the sake of
mostly by being snotty at each other. But yeah,
my friend's friend is my enemy.
Yeah.
Or the enemy of my enemy
is my friend. Yes.
So or
at least a guy I won't hit right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the idea that for the sake of the better good, they were willing to work with what they considered the tyrants of the galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah, the greater threat.
No, I'm just waiting for somebody to boo hiss at me, but when you look at
boo hiss. Oh, sorry. Do you want to say it first?
I'm just sometimes when I think about the other races and species and everything, for some reason I can see the Kardashians and the Klingons being like sassy neighbors to each other, Well,
what's interesting.
They have a barbecue once in a while, but you'd be like, "You never returned my lawnmower." I don't know why I see that.
I think
what's interesting.
They're both warlike. Yeah.
Have any of you here read John M. Ford's novel *The Final Reflection*? Came out in 1983.
I wish I had.
Well, you still can. It's not like it doesn't exist anymore.
Amazon's your friend.
You should be able to find it. If nothing else, I think it's available as an ebook.
Yeah, I think so.
Ford wrote it in 1983. It was before Star Trek 3 even came out, so all he had to go on was the 3 years of the original series and the brief appearance at the beginning of the motion picture, and that was it. And he built an entire Klingon culture, in much the same way Diane Duane built an entire Romulan culture in My Enemy, My Ally, mainly because they figured that nobody else was going to do it anyway. It was just going to be a movie every few years, and that was it. A lot of what Ford established was overwritten by what Next Gen established. But if you read what Ford wrote, what the Klingon culture he created is very much like what the Cardassians developed as. It's what Ford did was a society not so much of warriors but of soldiers. It was much more Spartan, really. And the Klingon Empire was sort of jointly ruled by the military and by Imperial intelligence, sort of like Central Command in the Obsidian Order. And in Ford's Klingon Empire, service to the state was more important than anything else. That's the Cardassians. And instead, Next Gen sort of developed them into Zulu Viking samurai, as we were talking about before. And so it wasn't quite compatible, but it was really. I was rereading the Final Reflection right before I started the Gorkon books, and then again when I did a novel called The Art of the Impossible, which actually had a Klingon-Cardassian conflict. And I was dealing with that to some extent, the difference between a warrior culture and
militaristic.
A culture of soldiers as opposed to a culture of warriors, where the people who had the highest place in society were similar in that fighting is involved, but for a Cardassian, it's much more structured and much more in terms of service to the state, as opposed to fulfilling a more nebulous sense of fulfillment and honor and glory. You know, there's actually, I think glory is probably the big one. Cardassians aren't big on glory; they're just big on winning.
Yeah.
If Enterprise didn't establish how smooth or ridges became smooth, what's your favorite theories on how you?
We do not discuss it with outsiders. That was fine. I was perfectly okay with that. Just that it was the perfect solution. Just we don't talk about it. Sorry.
Piss off.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
And you know why? I mean, in the 60s, it was budgets.
Yeah.
It was all about money.
Yeah, basically, we owe this entire thing to Gene Roddenberry having too much money to spend during motion of the picture, and he said, hey, let's make the Klingons have bumpy foreheads now.
Right. I mean, we went from not having any money to...
After that.
Right.
He still had the...
Yeah.
Barely.
Yeah, well, that's because he's Christopher Plummer, and you didn't put too much makeup on Christopher Plummer because he's famous.
Yeah, we were just happy Christopher
Besides,
Plummer
they were
was in
already
the movie.
welding an eye patch to his head.
How more hardcore do you want it?
Yeah.
Question, totally off the subject, is I've heard something to the effect that the Klingons didn't so much develop star travel as they took it from somebody who tried to conquer them.
That's been...
I believe that.
That was never actually stated on screen. Some people have decided to interpret it that way. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention in The Sword of Kalis on DS9, they established that the Klingons, before they went out into space, before they became a spacefaring empire, they were still on Kronos, but after they had been united as a people by Kalis, were conquered by a race called the Hurk. Well, not so much conquered. They were attacked and plundered. And then they went away because they took what they wanted and buggered off. That was the Klingons' first experience with an alien species. And after that, they became a star-spanning empire. The thing is, if they just plundered it from the Hurk, I mean, it's possible that they used the Hurk technology and were able to reverse engineer it to some extent. But they couldn't have just scavenged it and that was it, because they were able to build an empire after that. So there had to have been some skill there in the first place.
So at least, if nothing else, the reverse engineering might have started as the germ.
Yeah. And that's what led to them, and basically, but to my mind, them being conquered before they actually went out into space in the first place explains a lot about what we were talking about before, about how they have the drive to conquer and to be the biggest, baddest mothers on the block, because they were, the first time they encountered an alien, they were conquered, and they ain't letting that happen again.
So do unto others before they do unto you.
Basically, yeah. They caught us off guard. We are not going to allow this to happen again, and we're going to conquer everybody else before they can conquer us first. Yeah. And then in the back.
How did you guys like the books J.G. Hertzler did, The Left Hand of Destiny, and how well do you think they fit in with the rest of Star Trek?
I think they fit in fine.
I mean, they were great for me. And it's always interesting, like Shatner did. Of course, he did it early on with Reeve Stevens couple, but it's always interesting to see the actors try to start, writing for the stories, and obviously there's an economy to that. We know that there's money to be made with that. But I love how they try to get into that, and I loved his. I love the nuances in it. I was surprised by the nuances of it.
In Hertzler's case, the story was all his. The actual writing was Jeffrey Lang, who was his collaborator on it. JG is not a writer. Really. He although to his credit, Marco Palmieri gave him a shot at writing the first draft, and it wasn't something he was coming. He was fine with coming up with the story and plotting it out. And like I said, the actual plot is all him. And he worked direct, and he collaborated with Jeff directly. He consulted with Jeff throughout the entire writing of the book and whatnot. So it's not a case, because there've been plenty of actor written books where the actor's sole contribution is to sign a contract and collect a paycheck and put their money on the book and then go out and promote it, but they never actually are involved in the writing. I know of several actors in that case.
Nathan Fillion.
Be nice.
Oh no! There's no claim that Nathan Fillion wrote those books. First of all, it claims that Richard Castle wrote those books. Richard Castle doesn't actually exist. But no, nobody's ever claimed. I mean, it's not like Nathan goes around saying he wrote the book, except in the context of the show where he's playing the character. But in JG's case, he was very much involved in that. In Shatner's case, he's part of the plot. It's sort of and he supervises everything.
But that's how I fell in love with the Reeve Stevens couple.
But no, that was
Judy and Gar, because
he developed it with Marco Palmieri, the editor. But Marco was very much a hands-on editor, so anything he edited, he was part of the development on. But the basic idea of that was always supposed to be the idea of Martok as King Arthur, basically. And I definitely consider that the starting point from. I did a whole bunch of Klingon stories that took place after the end of Deep Space Nine. I considered that the prequel to what I was doing, and I used that as a signpost for how I wrote Martok in the Gorkon books, and A Time for War, A Time for Peace, and in Articles of the Federation, and A Singular Destiny. That was I always assumed that Left Hand of Destiny was what he did right after the war, and that's what solidified his power base as Chancellor. And just for the record, Martok is so much fun to write. He is one of just an it's such an easy voice to get into. He's JJ did such a wonderful job with that character. In the back, yes, you had a question.
I was going to ask you what y'all think of JJ's Klingons in that new movie.
I think I'm the only one who thought the rings in the ridges was really cool.
You mean the Klingons?
Yes, I loved that. I wouldn't expect every Klingon to do that, but there's got to be some who do.
Well, see,
lens flare.
That's a whole other panel.
See, I have to drive back. I actually have many hours driving ahead of me, and you saying that, I'm like, damn, and there's no rum in this Coke, because I could go off on a tear. It's not bad. Blingons, I love that. When she told me that,
I've heard that before.
When she told me that, I about died. I'm like, Blingons, true that. Okay.
I wouldn't want all of them to look like that, but
it is an interesting. Okay, so let's get that lens flare elephant out of the room, okay? All right, Abrams' movies did something that needed to be done. We could all disagree or agree in the manner in which it was done, but Star Trek came back to the big screen, revitalized the franchise. Don't know if we'll get a TV series out of it. We'll have to wait until after the third movie to see what happens. But in any event, we know that there could not have been a true reboot or reimagine, whatever you want to call it, without Klingons.
Yes.
In fact, a lot of us.
Supposed to be in the first movie.
And if you have the DVD, the Blu-ray, I don't know if it went on a regular DVD. If you went on the Blu-ray of Star Trek 09, they had the deleted scenes, and then he discussed that in an interview why at the end they chopped it, and that's our first time looking at. Well, the hooded Klingons and Rua Penthe. And so he knew even then Klingons needed to be part of the lore. But for editing reasons was taken out. And to his credit, brought back in. And it was an integral part of the storyline. Now, how they look, Shatner girdle, no girdle. We could talk about all of the characters and how they look at any particular incarnation of the Trek franchise. I was okay with them. The blue eyes kind of threw me off. The clothing that they wear, the costumes were pretty badass. But I will tell you, those batlets, I am going to get one of those mofos if it's the last thing I do. They were so intricately designed, and the props, and I did the research on them, half of them are the actual steel. They were fabricated for that movie. Half of the batlets were real. So they were cast metal. They're stainless steel. And if you look at them, they're way more intricate than anything else that we've seen in any of the franchise. So there was effort and this is my last word. There was effort put into making the Klingons as important as they were in the rest of the franchise, even though they may have been only a bit of Star Trek Into Darkness. And for some of us who love Klingons, who understand their importance in the franchise, in the lore, in the history, I have to give J.J. Abrams and his writers and his prop masters and everyone involved, makeup, everyone, costuming, I have to give them that. Thank you for giving us back something that is inextricably part of Star Trek. It's not just Kirk. Of course, there would be no Star Trek without the bridge crew. But we needed the Klingons, and we got them. So blue-eyed Klingons with, heavy metal leather and some badass boots and bathlets, I'll take it. Yeah. I'll take it until I can get something more. That's just me. That's just me.
The thing is, we only saw a small handful of Klingons. we're
and
not
they were
all
thugs, basically.
Yeah, we're not all bald. We don't all have blue eyes. We don't all have a lot of rings on our heads. So there's nothing to say that that's the only look.
Right.
Yeah.
But one thing that I really got a kick out of when I saw the movie was that the helmets actually had the ridge bumps in it, and I'm like, so I'm sitting there thinking, going like, wait, okay, so does that mean everybody has their own helmets?
Well, this means nobody else can use your helmet. That's my helmet, damn it.
But I really liked the redesign. I felt that it was good that they didn't just try to replicate what had already been done. It was very Klingon without being, just not copyrighted. What am I trying to say? Copies. There we go.
Right.
Monday at DragonCon.
Yes.
And it wasn't a campy version.
No.
It wasn't a caricature of the Klingons. It was a new Klingon that we've just never seen before.
And I'm so curious now because I'm like, you can't tell me that wasn't Praxis. That was Praxis.
Yes, thank you. I was going to bring that up.
So I'm going,
the moon is crashing into Kronos. It's like, what the hell happened that made that happen 20 years ahead of time?
So then, and so then you go back, okay, well, in Star Trek 6, they were going to fix this, and clearly Kirk is not old and retiring.
Yeah.
So what made what accelerated? Yeah. How are they still able to even live on the planet if Praxis? And I'm like, you didn't answer my question, you jerk.
Speaking of Praxis, I got a quick story. So where I was living at the time, Wednesday night, midnight premiere of Star Trek Into Darkness. I don't know if you were there.
I don't think I was with you.
But we were there, and I knew that one, if you're going to see Star Trek at midnight on a Wednesday, you had to have been a Trekkie or a Trekker. I mean, come on, let's be real here. I had to go to work the next day. I was there. So
I did.
I did. So people went in there, and when the Klingons, and when they showed Praxis exploding the screen, 3 guys were like, oh, hell no. They acted like they were flipping tables. And I'm in the back, and it was IMAX theater, right? So I'm in the back at this point, missing all kinds of dialogue because I'm on the floor laughing because there were Trekkies and one dude got up and was like, what the hell, man? You do? And then sat right back down, sat down, watched the rest of the movie. And I was like, JJ! So, you think about hardcore Trekkies, Trekkers fans, Praxis, you brought it up. That was a sticking point at 1 a.m. in a movie theater in Charleston, South Carolina. And when we all left the theater, everybody was like, oh, that was all right. Dude, what's up with Praxis? And I'm like high-fiving dudes like, you a real fan. You're a real fan.
I saw it in New York and I think I was the only one who noticed it.
Oh, no, I was surrounded by people. And I didn't know them. Okay, I didn't train them to do this.
Yeah. That's her story. And
yes, I'm sticking with it.
All right, so that's the panel from the Trek track. By the way, DragonCon, as Michael mentioned a couple of weeks ago, DragonCon has a ton of tracks going on. There's 5 hotels that host the event the entire weekend. It's from this past Thursday, and it'll go on until, it's like Thursday night, until mid-afternoon Monday. It's not only, in terms of size, but in terms of the number of days of coverage. Now, the next panel we're doing is from the American, I'm going to say American Sci-Fi Classics, but that's not what it's from. It's the American Sci-Fi and Fantasy track. And that's something I like too. They have modern sci-fi, fantasy, and then they also have a classic track, which is basically anything older than 10 years suddenly becomes classic. But it gets real interesting, I guess, when it comes to these reboots and stuff. Where does it fall? Because its roots are classic now, but it's modern. Anyway, this is from the American Sci-Fi and Fantasy track. This is where Keith was sitting down with several other fans and such of the TV show Supernatural, and they discussed various themes of Supernatural. Now, the thing is, Keith has written 3 Supernatural books. I'll put links up. If you've never picked up his Supernatural books, here's a good opportunity to, and maybe this panel discussion will also whet your appetite. In any case, enjoy.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Maureen Gallagher. I live here in Atlanta, and I've been to a ton of Supernatural panels. This is the first time I've been on one. I actually watched this show. I actually watched Supernatural all at one time, kind of mainline.
That's the first time I've heard that. I've heard binge, but not mainline.
That's how I've heard all.
I ran out of them, and it ended at the end of season 5, and then I had to wait until season 6 started. And I was like, no, I have to be able to watch them all at one time. But I learned, and I've watched it all, and I love it. And I haven't written any books or any other official supernatural fiction. And I love the show, and this past season has been a little rough for me, but I will go down with this ship. This is my show. I will always love this show.
Well, my name is Father Brian Small. I'm a priest here in Atlanta, St. Peter and Paul, just about 15-20 minutes to the east of here. And we're just discussing. We've been doing this panel for 6 years now, and so that really is just my only credentials is longevity. But started watching the show right when it first aired, episode to episode, and enjoyed it off and on. Although we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. But I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Wendy Pembroke. I'm the co-host of a podcast called Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV.
Oh, hi, Wendy. I didn't see that. There's all these people here.
Asked me to be on a panel last year talking about Vampire Diaries with my co-host Kevin Batchelder. And the reason I tell you that is because the reason we do this podcast is because Kevin and I, we used to do a podcast about Farscape, and it ended. We kept talking about genre shows all the time. And he's like, Wendy, if you stop emailing me about Supernatural, I'm only going to talk to you if we do a podcast. So it became a regular show that we talked about on our show. So just a big fan. Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Beth Dolgner. I'm an author also, although I have not had the fortune of writing supernatural books. Not yet. I write paranormal romance, but I also write nonfiction covering such fun subjects like ghosts and voodoo, which I think is part of the reason Carol asked me to be on these panels. You know, that realness to it?
Yeah, that's right.
If you want to call it that.
We'll see authenticity, but I knew you were a big fan, too.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. So there was a huge void in my life when the X-Files ended. And so I watched the pilot episode of Supernatural, and they made that Mulder and Scully joke, and I was like, I'm in. So that was the end of that.
I'll make it brief. Hey, my name is Damien. You can find me on Twitter as _you_madman. I, like Father Brian, I'm not actually technically I am according to the internet paperwork.
It's only for weddings.
Yeah. Well, I've done a couple of exorcisms. But you can find me occasionally lurking on another pop culture website called acoffee.com. They actually are doing several other events here. And like Father Brian, I've been doing several Supernatural panels, a few other panels here at DragonCon, between Brit Track, X Track, and now Urban Fantasy Track, now that we have one once again.
Yes.
And I'm very happy about that. And so, yeah, that's about it.
By the way, any Supernatural, any Sleepy Hollow fans in the room? Okay. I have a Sleepy Hollow novel coming out in a month. It's not out yet. It's still at the printer, but I have bookmarks.
There is a fan panel for that on Sunday.
Yes.
There is. Yes.
It's Sunday night, and I'll be at that panel, and there'll be a free prize for one lucky person there.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear through this mic? Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, one question I have is, people end up talking on these fan panels about, especially for long-running shows or things that are, maybe they were only on for a few seasons, but they're over. And I'm just curious, now that we've been through 9 seasons of the show, how many of you in the audience have been watching it the whole time since it first began airing? Not like when it came out on DVD, but when it's okay. So quite a few of you. Good. Okay. And I will say I did the same, except there's one episode I've never watched, and that was kind of on purpose. It was from season 1. It had to do with creepy crawlies. But anyway, that's I digress. But it has nothing to do with themes or anything. But I'm just saying it's just curious to me because of the way that people do watch things now. That you're able to do that you can sit and watch a whole season. If you can risk not having it spoiled for you by, the rest of the world. So that's kind of a problem. But when I was thinking about the different themes that this show covers, there are some obvious ones. I mean, the most obvious one, and one that fits in so specifically to the genre that this track covers with urban fantasy, is the whole good versus evil thing. To me, that's a very important theme of the show, and also because it can be very nuanced. The people you think are good aren't necessarily always good, and the ones you think are evil are not always evil, probably. And I'm just saying the man is too funny. There's no way to hate him. I'm just saying. Okay. So for me, I think that would probably be the most obvious first answer. And what I would like the panelists to tell us is what they see. Do you see that as being a major theme of the show? And if you don't, why not?
All right, I'll go first. I think that's certainly one of the themes. I think
that's not the only one. No.
I think the theme that is the most important to me, anyway, is the fact that it's about two brothers, specifically, and everything that entails. To my mind, the most important line in the entire series is at the beginning of the first episode when John tells Dean, "Take your brother and run. Now, Dean, go." That's the series right there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Basically, it's Dean protecting Sam and at least to some extent or other, that bond between the two of them, that basically it's been just the two of them since they were little tiny children, and they've only really had themselves to rely on because John was not what you'd call a reliable father. That bond between the two of them is the thing that's really sustained the show throughout all the ups and downs and ins and outs and such. And the good and evil was even in a sense embodied in that, because one of them was supposed to go to hell and one of them was supposed to become, they were supposed to be the vessels for Lucifer and Michael as well. So.
I think that one of the things I think that really illustrates the theme of good and evil and how it's not really all that clear all the time on this show. It's always a little blurred. There was a scene, I think it was near the end of season 8, with Meg and Cass, and she was saying, well, you're a little bad and I'm a little bit good. So, there's always just kind of, people aren't always the same as they start out to be. And it kind of, good and evil is kind of, it's a sliding scale on the show.
That's good. We need to quote that somewhere.
Yeah, it's never just a black and white issue, because there's lots of cloudiness in their dealings with other people and each other.
Well, I think something that now that we're 9 seasons in, that it's become a little more apparent, especially in the last season, is the theme of forgiveness. That these are two brothers that have done kind of crappy things to each other, and that you're talking about, they have this bond and there's a genuine love there, but that love has been tested, and they haven't really necessarily passed the test. And I think it seems that we sort of alternate seasons over who gets possessed or who gets altered.
How many more places?
Usually it's Sam, sometimes it's Dean, and so they're kind of like in this compromise state. But even in this past season, the whole thing with Kevin obviously really dramatically affected their relationship because of their ability to be, can they really trust each other? And that speaks to the idea that, forgiveness is not just this undo button. It's not saying, well, okay, it's all good. Well, no, it's not all good. Definitive damage has been inflicted, but then what do you do? How do you love someone in the face of that instead of just pretending like it never happened? And I think that's a very salient theme, even if the season itself was pretty uneven.
Yes, I agree. Two things. One, good and evil in the beginning of the show was very clearly defined by bad.
Yeah.
And monsters are bad. Season 2 was when Dean was like, oh, maybe everything we killed didn't actually need to be killed. But I think of the show more about sacrifice.
Yeah,
and
that's one of the other.
what you owe your family and what they owe you over time, right? Because that seems very fluid in the show. Some days you owe them everything, and some days you're done.
You owe them a kick in the butt.
Yeah. And to me, the thing I really like about Supernatural is we have two males who are, the way they behave in their family is not traditional at all, because Dean is essentially Sam's mother, and he's essentially the matriarch who holds the family together, which is always one of the things I find the most fascinating about the story. So, that's it.
I think, we talk about good versus evil. Sam and Dean are good, and they are out fighting something evil all the time. But I think there's a lot of good and evil going on between the two of them in their relationship. Because, again, who's going to get possessed this season? But also, just the choices they make. You see them make some of these choices, and you're just like, oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And so they cross those lines sometimes, and even though in their head they're doing it for the right reasons, they're still getting into good versus evil territory. So it's interesting to see the choices that they make, and that sort of battle that they're always doing.
And here's where I kind of differ, where I don't think it's about good and evil. Like there's some clearly defined evils on the show, like this past season. I'm not ever going to put Abaddon into the good column whatsoever, right? Or even Crowley for that matter. I know flat out.
Although he does get all the good lines.
Yeah, he does.
I think that's in Mark Allen Shepard's contract. He appears on a show, he gets all the good lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's wrong, right? And for me, that's a lot of life, right? For most people, there are good and bad choices, but there's definitely clear boundaries of this over here. This is evil, right? I'll never put Charles Manson into the good column for anything, right? But I can forgive someone else that, okay, well, you know what? I thought this situation over here was one thing, and it turns out it's another, and I made the best possible choice given where I was at a certain time. I do believe that people are imperfect and make mistakes, and I see a lot of that. I have an older brother. I've got other siblings. The crap that I've gone through, with that. So when I look at Sam and Dean, I go, yeah, I understand. I just left the family reunion where my mom got on my nerves for 6 hours. Right? That's all I wanted to do was leave. So does it make her evil? No, not in the least bit. Did she get on all of our nerves? Yes.
Comes with the territory. Right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think that it's necessarily been that things that, characters who were once good are now evil, or vice versa, or anything like that. And I don't think that, I don't think there's anything you can say good about Charles Manson. And, to use your example. But I think that things evolve. that you see that is somebody who's essentially a good person does some things that maybe are not in good judgment. But I do think that at the heart of the show that is one of the themes, that whole question of good versus evil. And the reason I think it's important is because from their perspective, they can't always tell. Look at how many times they've had to dispose of monsters that they weren't really sure they should have to. They didn't really want to, or, monsters are people too kind of thing. But, they ended up doing it because that was what they needed to do. The kid who was going to grow up to be a Wendigo or whatever it was, I think it was a Wendigo. And you had a comment over here.
Yeah, I did.
You want to?
Sure.
I'll hold up you speaking.
Okay, I was just going to say that it's a little bit beyond good versus evil and expanding on like what some of them have said and the family dynamic, yes, but it's also about each of them discovering and choosing for themselves what is good, what is evil, what is right, what is wrong, because all of their life they had because Dean, his dad told him something and he held fast to that because according to him, that's what a good son did. And Sam is the one who bucked the system, and he started learning and started questioning and started doing all that. And later on, Dean starts doing that. And it's about the evolution of these characters and them actually becoming their own people rather than this cookie-cutter version of their father or just the exact opposite of what their father wanted. It's about them actually, realizing everything he said wasn't gospel, but everything he said wasn't wrong. And it's about them choosing and discovering what is right and wrong and good and evil in their own eyes and in their own lives.
And it does change given the circumstances that they find themselves in as well. But one of the other things that I do feel as though is an important theme, and several of you have touched on it, is family. And what does that mean? Because we've seen people come and go on the show, to put it mildly, but I think it was an episode just in this past season where Dean, or maybe it was last year when he said something, or this year before when he said something about Kevin being family, and he referred to Kaz being family. So, they're kind of redefining all of that and what that means. And I do see that as being a theme on the show. And what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, family is as much... there's biological family and there's chosen family.
Right.
And Bobby obviously isn't related to them at all, but he's much more of a father to them than John ever was. And just from sheer sticking around, Cass is part of the family.
He's popping up in all kinds of ways.
You can't get rid of him. And why would you want to, really? I mean, he looks cool in the stubble. But the bond of family is one that has been critical throughout the entire series. It's one of the things that's pretty much kept Dean and Sam sometimes from killing each other. But it's a lot, in a lot of ways, it's what keeps them going. One of my favorite scenes was right before Dean was about to go to hell when they are singing horribly "Wanted Dead or Alive" in the Impala. And that was a case. These are two brothers being brothers one last time before one of them goes to hell. And that moment was just such a wonderful defining moment for the two of them. And that's because of the strength of the family bond that they have, as, brothers both by blood and really by choice,
Yeah, I think the family theme, I think it kind of goes in both directions, kind of like what you were saying about forgiveness. They're so close because they are family and they were all each other had for all of this time. But just like what happened in the middle of this season, when you're talking about, resetting and, forgiving people because they're your family and giving them a little bit extra slack. And, Dean kind of wants everything to go on and be okay. And he says, we're family. And Sam says, every bad thing that's ever happened to us is because we're family.
Which is also true.
So, it kind of, it doesn't automatically mean like, okay, you're my brother, so I'm going to forgive you no matter what you do. That's just not, I think closer to the beginning of the series, that would have been the case. But certainly now that they've developed so much as characters and they've changed so much, I don't think that's the case anymore.
It's apparently a party going on without us.
When you think about their actual relatives, their blood relatives over time, Grandpa Campbell didn't pan out so well.
No,
cousins that were hunters didn't pan out so well.
Yeah, that plot line really pissed me off on several levels. But
they sent to hell and forgot about.
Yeah.
I love it. It's one of my favorite internet memes. It's Adam, and he's like dancing, and like underneath him, it says, "I'm still in hell." Yoo-hoo! Hey guys.
And
I'm not dead yet.
and this year, he literally had a monster daughter. That same kid. So they are redefining the limits of family a lot over this season, I think. And I think you were talking about Castiel is adopted family.
Yeah.
Bobby is their adopted father for sure. Kevin was, and I'll be very curious if the show ever decides to let them have some more people who stay around beyond Castiel.
Hell, in a lot of ways, Ellen and Joe were family too, to some extent. Yeah, Ellen actually more than Joe, which was the reverse of what they intended. But
I definitely say I have watched every episode multiple times. I have never rewatched Abandon All Hope. That is the one episode that I have never ever been able to watch a second time.
Yeah, that was rough. Did you guys want to?
Well, I think Bobby said it best when he said family ain't about blood boy. I mean, it's not about blood. It's about the people you trust, people these relationships with, and they've forged these relationships, and they've lost just as many. So it's as tragic as it is sweet. They build this great little kind of family, and then somebody never dies. So it's hard. So it's almost like why keep trying? But
Oh, I have nothing. It's pretty much about how your parents screw you up. They really didn't stand a chance from the beginning, right?
Oh, yeah.
They grew up with those issues. Those issues are going to be there regardless. They're never going to 100% completely trust each other again. There's always going to be a little nagging something in the back of one of their mind of, okay, things are good right now. When is this going to go belly up? Right? Because they keep having the same conversation in the car.
Exactly.
That is a repetitive conversation that they've had for season after season after season. And okay.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. Maybe they made they did like one take on that, and they just keep using it over and over.
No, because the hair is different each time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They do have a few different editions.
And occasionally it's a different flannel shirt.
And somebody else
saving you all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and somebody else mentioned sacrifice here, which is another one of the themes that I think the show has. But then the last one I want to mention before we start asking other people what theirs are is the last thing that struck me when I was sitting there thinking, okay, what are some of the themes that have resonated with me over the 9 years that I've been watching the show? And one of them that strikes me is kind of trying to figure out the role or the place of an individual in the larger scheme of things. How do I fit into the universe? What is my place and what is my responsibility? Because theirs is kind of skewed, let's face it. I mean, based upon what they do for a living or, not, which sometime I'd like for somebody to explain to me where they get their money, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway.
Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah, okay.
Especially, do you know how much gas the Impala guzzles? Gas is $4 a gallon, man. This is yeah.
Yes. What's that? Okay. Let me ask though. So you guys discuss amongst yourselves, panelists, please. I have to answer a question.
Okay.
Well, if I can just hijack this just for a moment.
Too late. She's gone. You can do what you want.
Two themes that were in the season that I'm not really sure work. First of all, the whole thing about human blood being this big drug that Crowley trips on. Did that even make sense to you? Because human blood is not that hard to get.
No.
So the analogy that human blood is
that stuff's everywhere, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I just didn't.
Yeah, if that got you high, he would have already known about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there would be no short.
He's been around for a few thousand millennia. Yeah.
And the other thing is the episode with the suicide bombers. Was that just a little forced? And I get the sense that this season they were just throwing a lot of wet pasta at the wall to see if anything would stick. I don't know. Thoughts?
I thought Crowley was like pulling human blood full of axe.
Sorry?
I thought with Crowley, human blood, I thought it was all an axe.
It's just a way to mess with people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just playing.
It would be in character, certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
That was my thought.
I mean, this is a guy who basically.
Have to be, purified of all their sins.
Over here?
I thought it had less to do with it just being human blood and more to do with the trial. Yeah, the trial was never finished, and so he was left in that state of limbo. And so that was feeding his desire to be one or the other, because he was just stuck in that state. And so blood was kind of pushing him right to that edge, and he was just kind of hovering there. That's what I read it as.
I feel like there was that one episode near the end of this past season, Bloodlines, where the guy's fiance got killed by a monster, and it wasn't really a monster, it turned out to be a crazy human. But
Imagine.
I hate when that happens.
They tried to throw in this whole thing between this town that had a civil war between monsters. And I felt like that was kind of thrown in there.
Well, that's the pilot.
That was a pilot for a spin-off.
What do they call that? A backdoor?
Bloodline.
Backdoor pilot, yeah.
But the spin-off didn't get picked up.
That was supposed to be the foundation for a new series that will not. Maybe in novel form.
I doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was interesting because it didn't. The timbre of that whole world didn't really, to me, quite mesh with the world of the hunters.
It was too what?
It was too pretty. Yeah.
Well, it is a CW show. I mean,
they were trying to more kind of a little bit more Vampire Diary-ish.
I mean, one of the things that has always impressed me about Supernatural, and it's actually something I said in the intro to In the Hunt, this is a show that is much better than it needs to be. I mean, they could get. It's a show on the CW. They could get away with two pretty guys in a cool car driving into a town and shooting monsters in the head, and they do that. But they could just keep it at that, and it still probably would have been a successful show. But one of the things I love is that they really go beyond that. That they've really dug into, made it such a complex, interesting world. One of the hallmarks of the show has been the world building. Which is something that fantasy and science fiction in particular have to do to some extent, and not everyone is always good at it. But the show has done a really good job of building a relatively consistent mythology and history, both internally and referencing itself and moving stuff forward and establishing something in one episode and keeping it after that. Like when they got the tattoos of the anti-possession thing, which was just that was such a nice touch. And we're fine.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, and building on stuff like that, it's one of the things that I think that has kept it from not being canceled, really, is because they've done that better than a lot of the other network shows have managed to do.
They put in just enough. They add a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah, and they keep trying to end it.
Yes.
Do you guys think the show? You always have kind of touched on the Angels and Demons, but do you think in season 4 when they went full bore Meltonian fantasy, and brought in the Angels and Demons, do you think the show got stronger after that, or before when it was just a lot of monster hunting and you only saw the dark half of that world, but never?
Personally, I thought it limited the show a little too much. They were going back to the Angels and Demons thing so much that they were. One of the things I liked about the show was the variety of types of stories they could tell. By doing, hey, let's find an urban legend and mess with it. Going from town to town and finding a different thing, like Kane and Kung Fu or the Incredible Hulk or Sam Beckett or whatever, just traveling around from place to place. Yeah, or The Fugitive. All that very open kind of setting. I thought the Angel Demon War got a little too dominant. But on the other hand, there was some really cool stuff in it too.
Yes.
You know, because it took its cue mostly from Milton, which I think was all for the best. Really, that made it a more interesting storyline.
Well, and actually,
And it gave us Castiel. So.
and before you asked your question, actually, I was thinking along the same lines of it, although not specifically the angels and demons and all of that, but I know there are a lot of people who say, I mean, you still hear this argument. Well, I liked it better when it was a monster of the week, them on the road doing this, doing that, and and then there are people who don't like the overarching themes that go on or story arcs that go on over seasons. Personally, I loved the fallen angels thing and the whole angel and demon thing. I thought it was fascinating, and that's my opinion. And for me, I think that it's really hard to sustain a show that people care about because it actually means something for 9 years if all you're doing is finding a different monster every year.
Yes.
If you were doing something besides that, and they still do it some, yes. What was your comment?
Crowley makes the show for me. My wife listens to Neil Diamond, so I feel this.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
I feel this pain. So I think having a bad guy with a sense of humor, it's not just the dark, this guy puts jabs in every once in a while. That kind of adds to it.
Nobody ever went wrong casting Mark Allen Shepard in anything.
Yeah, this is true.
As proven by the fact that he's been cast in pretty much everything the last few years.
One of the caveats I want to say to that, though, is I like the fact that they did bring in, some other things and let's go back and forth with the angel demon thing, but I also think part of that has gotten too convoluted.
Yes.
Just like Monster of the Week will detract from a show.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's true.
This thing has now run its course so much. I'm like, okay, I love you guys, but I need you to.
But please stop.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like in 24, where every other episode somebody else comes into a suit. I'm in charge of CTU. No, I'm in charge of CTU.
But millions of innocent lives are stake.
Down on the ground now.
Unlock a socket.
It's like everything that they've been through and all of these different things that go back and forth. It's like, okay. A person can only mentally sustain so much trauma.
Yeah.
At some point, right, you have to stop, assess the damage, clean your house, put things back in order. And I don't think we really had that. We had an opportunity for that with the Men of Letters thing and then the Batcave. That could have been a fresher starting point of, okay.
But what's interesting though is that
almost there.
Yeah, neither of them have ever. At best, they've only really had brief tastes of an actual, life. Right. For Sam, it was the first couple of years at Samford. For Dean, it was the summer that he spent being normal. But that's it.
Whole summer.
I mean, there was one episode where it was that thing where Dean had. They both had normal, the image of them having normal lives, and Dean's was completely ridiculous, and because you could tell he had no point of reference, This in a lot of ways, Dean is completely disconnected from the actual human experience.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. These guys should be completely binky bunkers,
That's why
shoving pencils up their nose and underpants on their head at this point.
Letters, Dean takes to that much more than Sam.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to. There's a sense of almost like a nesting instinct.
Yeah.
It's like here's home.
But also there's a certain comfort in, I don't say institutional, but the Men of Letters. I mean, as someone who was somewhat bonded to an institution.
Really?
Now that's the quote of the day.
There's a certain. It gives you a certain sense of a compass.
Yes.
And I think that's what Dean found very attractive. Although I still have absolutely no idea how there's Wi-Fi and they're compact. Because everything else is from the 1950s.
Sam Winchester has Wi-Fi in his brain because anywhere he is, there is Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter where they are. There's a chip in his head.
By the way, that's the other thing I want to know what they pay for. How do they pay for their cell phone service? Where do the bills go? Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But,
Actually, I always assumed Bobby handled it, but
You probably do, yes. I was so excited when they, with the whole Men of Letters thing, when they found that inner sanctum. And in my notes, I always refer to it as their lair.
Yeah.
I don't, just because I don't know what else to call it. But that's kind of what somebody said, the Batcave. Was that you?
Yeah.
So, but in any case, that is kind of what it feels like. But that's a really cool idea because it's like here they did have something that could resemble a home, especially for Dean, who feels so secure there. And
he's never had a home, really.
Right. So, for him, that was a pretty special place. I've always enjoyed that particular part of the group. Let me come to you, but we've had somebody here with do you have a comment, question?
Yeah,
just a comment. If you speak up just a little bit, and I can repeat.
Yeah, I can speak up. It's fine. I have a loud voice. I just try to hold back most times.
It's okay. We're not in a library.
It's DragonCon. There's no holding back here.
I know, right? And I was just going to expound on some of the things that you guys have said, especially when it comes to the whole, limiting themselves and doing Monster of the Week and things like that. This is a show that works that shouldn't work.
Yeah. This is a show that works that shouldn't work.
In all honesty, shows like this have a shelf life, but, this one has really, really done with it. Supernatural has done really well. Charmed did really well. All of these shows did really well, and it's because of those underlying themes that we all relate to. It's because of those things. Yes, the monsters and the magic and all that is fun and interesting, and it takes us out of our reality. But at the same time, these characters are still relatable. You even relate to the demons and the angels, and that is why it works and why it's still on television and will probably be on television until the actors decide to leave the show.
Yeah, until they're old and gray or
older. Friends, case in point, Friends. That show would have lasted even longer, but they were like, no, we're done.
Yeah, we've had enough.
I think they're kind of getting to the point age-wise where they can't really take a whole lot more getting thrown around rooms and up against walls.
Oh, they have stunt doubles for that. Come on.
They've got somebody who can step up.
It's okay, Castle fixes.
That's right, yeah. Castle Go right here in front.
I do want to get your take on the angels about God being missing.
God being missing. That's our question for Father Brown.
All right.
You knew this was coming.
First question. Well, it reminds me of Dogma. God goes to play skee ball.
He goes to play skee ball.
And then it gets to this sort of Augustinian notion of can God create a rock that's so heavy that even he can't move it? So can he really limit himself by placing himself in this person playing skee ball who then gets mugged and is in a coma? I think really what it comes down to is that the writers don't want to do a Battlestar Galactica, or even more by insinuation, Lost, by making it a God thing. And even, obviously, I think we've all been heartbroken by the loss of Robert Williams. And if you haven't watched What Dreams May Come, because I've been going through Netflix for the last few weeks, Fisher King, Awakenings, but in Dreams May Come, when he gets to heaven, he goes, well, where's God? And people going through, he's up there somewhere loving us. And I think they are trying to keep that sort of nebulous. And, something that I've touched on a little bit in my day job is if you look at if you look at Western civilization 100 years ago versus now, 100 years ago, the fear of hell was a real thing. And that's where churches get a lot of power out of that. Fear of hell is no longer a motivating factor for folks. And I think part of that is World War II. When we were able to see that we could create hell, then the fear of it really diminishes. And so I think religion has to understand itself differently. And I think the idea of the missing God is really kind of, by extension, part of that kind of problem of evil. That, can there be an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving creator, deity, prime mover, and yet we have a world that is so broken? And we see that brokenness manifested in so many ways. And so where is God in all this? My answer is, after 9/11, Christ is in the bubble. But I think part of what the writers are going for is that they don't want to quite hang their hat on that. So the the missing god gets them off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
But it also reflects that problem of evil question.
And then in something that's having a live that's running around.
Yeah.
There's always a downside.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, those Leviathans, I just didn't care for them. Right here, we had some,
Yeah, I don't think anybody really liked it.
Okay, you're asking the panelists. What episode affected you most, or has had the most impact?
The season or in general?
Oh, good. Because I would have to go with Justin Bellow, which was the one where Agent Hendrickson was killed. Where Agent Hendrickson first found out that in fact Sam and Dean really weren't crazy guys who desecrated graves, but were in fact really demon hunters. And then he gets killed. Victor Hendrickson is my favorite character in the Supernatural universe. Completely, because I loved his response to Sam and Dean, because that's how a cop would respond to what these guys are doing. It was a perfectly reasonable response from Dad, and I love the fact that every time we saw him, he kept getting closer to stopping them. That he wasn't just, what's his name, the reporter on the Incredible Hulk, Mr. McGee, who never actually got
angry.
Yeah, but who never got any closer. Hendrickson actually kept getting closer to capturing them, and then of course he did capture them, and then all hell broke loose. But that was the speech that Hendrickson gave to Dean about how here I think I've accomplished something because I've done what I've done, and then now I find out that this is going on, and I haven't accomplished squat. And I especially loved that because Hendrickson is pretty much what Dean would have been if he had a normal life. If Dean had grown up as a person instead of a hunter, he would have been Hendrickson. And we saw it in that episode in particular because the two of them worked together like they've been working together their whole lives. And that whole thing, everything that happened in that episode was just so effective, culminating in basically everybody dying.
What else is new?
Yeah. That I actually got to read the script for that because it happened while I was writing Bone Key, and I got to see the scripts ahead of time for the episodes that were coming up, and it blew me away, and I was almost afraid to watch the episode because just the script affected me that much. And then I watched it, and also sometimes because there were a couple of other ones I saw where the script promised something that the actual episode didn't deliver. There was another episode in that same sequence in that season when they were supposed to be going to a town that was like completely overrun by debauchery, and what they described in the script was a lot more interesting than what we actually saw on screen. But
not HBO.
No, but I mean it didn't even come close. It looked like Vancouver with a couple of scantily dressed people on it. But anyway, that was the episode for me.
It was really, really hard to pick one. If I had to pick one, I think season 6, episode 20, The Man Who Would Be King. That's the one where Castiel is sitting on the bench at the beginning of the episode, and he starts telling his story.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think I used up an entire box of Kleenex watching that episode. And it was, I think I was really attached to the character, but I think it was just, it kind of, you had seen all of these things that were happening from different perspectives, but that particular episode kind of pulled all of those things together. And you kind of saw, oh, well, this is what we saw, but this is what was happening right over here, and we didn't know about that. And so it did kind of pull together a lot of things that we hadn't seen before, but it was incredibly emotional for me. And I think that was probably the one that affected me the most.
Just thinking of this past season, because I don't binge watch it, so it's hard to put the whole canon in. But in this past season, the episode with Kevin's mother, where the look at her face,
I see we have some
and the resolve that she knows, the realization that she knows her son is dead, and it's like because no one had to tell her.
Yeah.
And just to see her heartbreak because her whole investment, everything that her whole life was him. And see that taken away, that was just a very harsh moment.
The one that I've been thinking of, because we were talking about sort of what's the mission of a lot of the characters, was the episode where Lisa gets possessed by the demon, and Dean and the little kid have to go and save her. And it basically turns into John as he's trying to instruct him in order to save Lisa. And then at the end, he realizes his life is so toxic to the people he cares about, he's just going to erase himself from their life. And to me, that was really the point where he's made that choice. It's like, I cannot have anything like the normal life, which really enabled the whole embracing of that mission of being men of letters, and that's his purpose. And in some ways, I think now he's sort of given up his "Am I my brother's keeper" mission in a way. He's sort of like letting go of that. I'm really curious if that's the main thing that happens when he's a demon, is that he really does tell Sam to take off.
So I'm not just like a broken record, but I really have to look at that episode. I mean, just because that first time I watched it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be an incredible adventure. And now going back and rewatching that episode, knowing everything we know now and having seen everything those guys have been through in the past 9 seasons, it gives you such a different perspective going back to that first one. You know, like back then we thought Dean was such a hard hunter, and he'd seen everything. And, Sam was still, a little more optimistic and tried to have a normal life. So to go back and watch that is still like, gosh, there's so much coming from these boys, and they have no idea what's in store for them. So I think it's still very emotional.
They were so young and cute.
Yeah. I mean, they may not be young anymore.
Yeah. I did actually read an article where they said they had to re-record that part in the beginning.
Yeah.
Where that they keep replaying.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the line was, but right, yeah. And he said they had to go back and record it because his voice had changed so much over the course of the series that it said when they did that like dub over with that line, it sounded ridiculous because it didn't sound like him anymore at all.
That's
well,
funny.
that is kind of an interesting thing to think about. That when you go on for 9 years, when you start out with a couple of actors who were fairly young. I mean, they weren't kids, but they were fairly young. They were young men, and now they're men. And so it's changed just, the physicality, not just, what they've been through and their kind of mental, where they are mentally. Okay, Damien, we still need you in there.
Yes.
There are two.
Oh.
I stay split between the really, really fun episodes, right? So Dr. Sexy MD.
Yeah.
That's just, pure fun to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Just going from scene to scene. That's exactly, that's hilarious. And you kind of need that with all the crap that they go through.
Yeah. You do have to have
you
those.
need to have those pressure being released moments of, all right, there's more to it than us dying on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
But the other one that I think back of when everyone was talking was when Dean went back to the boys' home that he stayed in.
Oh, yeah.
That one, right? It was, I could have had a chance at being normal, and this was one time in my life that, you know what? Things were pretty okay, right? Because they go through so much crap. I actually enjoy the moments when they do get to look back and go back to a spot where we got a break for a minute. Right? Yeah. And I had a little bit of peace in my life for a second.
Yeah, so even in addition to the ones, as you said, the humorous episodes, and they do still try to throw those in at least once a season. I think it's usually more often than that, but it's like you got to give us that every now and then. Oh, yeah. Because you have to alleviate that deep, dark, pit that they're throwing us into.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to just stop for a minute and go, hey, swap me.
Yeah.
Or
we just need a break for a minute.
The difference between like Marvel and DC films earlier today, and he was talking about Adventures, where it's like, all right, you were go. Stop. Interject some comedy that's kind of deflate because you can't stay at that level of pressure and intensity the entire time. You've got to deflate it.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody over here had a question.
She mentioned God disappearing. I actually thought that was kind of my perspective on the whole show has been it's all about free will and the choices we make throughout life. If God doesn't disappear, how can the angels ever have free will since they're kind of programmed?
if God, okay, say it again. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
it's been a really long day. No, that's okay.
My perspective on Supernatural is the entire show is actually about free will and the choices you make throughout your life. And when these guys are taking a set of parameters, and yeah, the choices suck. Sorry, but as they go through life, they pick their family, they pick who they're going to be with and stay with, and who's important to them. And again, with God disappearing, how could the angels have free will because they're kind of programmed like computers?
Right.
Without God having disappeared. So kind of like, what do you think on free will, God's disappearance, and how it all relates as far as the show's theme? So
okay.
that's the first question.
And she was talking about free will, for those of you in the back, about free will being one of the themes of the show and the choices that people make. And if God is really gone, how can the angels have free will since they've all been kind of free? What's that?
Without him being gone.
Yeah, that God being gone is basically it's that's the necessary step that had to be taken to bring the angels. Yeah, which yeah. I mean, one of the things I was thinking when you asked that question originally was that God is gone because it makes for a better story. Yeah. And you just explained why. So thank you.
I was want to get a little technical. At least Thomistically speaking, that angels do have free will, but their will is so conformed perfectly to the will of God that
I'm going with just the world view as
in real life, yeah.
Right.
Well, I tell you, then it means it makes for really, really crappy angels.
Yeah.
What happens? Because like when you start looking at, all right, demons.
Well, these guys are pretty dickish anyway. I mean,
like seriously, the angels on the show are far more horrible.
They were awful.
Oh yeah.
Right? Well, because what we see is not about good and evil. It's about vested interests. Exactly. One group's interest versus another group's interest.
Yes. Yeah. The
Yes, right here, all the way in the back. Can you stand up?
Yeah. You've mentioned this a couple of times about married families using their money to about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the monsters in this film are living in civilians, but a lot of civilians die. Especially they're living in the
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, that's really gross. Actually, there was something they established early on. Credit card fraud they can't really pull off. They literally don't have the equipment for it. They gave lip service to it about how he applies for credit cards and then just gets them, but that'll last him maybe 5 minutes, and that's pretty much impossible to pull off now. What they can do, and what they have established also, is that Dean is a phenomenally good poker player, and
Sam is a phenomenal pool player, and they hunt
right.
Oh, okay. See.
Wait a minute, Sam's the pool player? I thought that was Dean also. Okay. Yeah, which was the only thing that explains how Sam survived without Dean. But if you can get into a good high stakes game, you can get 5 or 6 figures in winnings, which will keep you going for a while. At the very least, it'll keep your
and it's
gas
all
guzzler.
cash, tax free.
Exactly. Yes. Especially if it's an illegal casino, which I
always got the whole phone thing. When they were pretending that, especially with Bobby, how he had all the different phones in his house, and that all made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it was funny and it made sense. But it's been bugging me for years. I'm like, how do these guys get their money?
Yeah.
And
it doesn't actually. I mean, they should be much dirtier. Their clothes should be crappier.
Well, that's my point. How do they stay in suits so well pressed?
Yeah.
Traveling in a car.
I mean, the flannel shirts, yeah.
But really like hanging them up on a suit.
First of all, because there is no trunk. It's filled with like demon
You see the back seat.
Those hotels don't have dry cleaning?
Yeah.
No, not the ones they stay in.
No.
We have time for one more question. Somebody who had their hand. There was somebody up here who had their hand up.
I had a comment.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to touch on what you said about the episode where Lisa gets possessed by a demon. I just think that one of the things for me that was so emotional about that was the fact that he said, when I picture myself happy, I picture myself happy with you to her. And the fact that when he erased her, he was erasing his chance to go be happy. And that was just really profound to me.
Well, plus it also didn't work. I mean, he was trying to keep her safe. Yeah, demons all knew that he loved her. So
Just put her in more danger because he didn't know that demons might want to come kill her.
On the other hand, at that point, the toothpaste was out of the tube anyway, and there's no point in advertising that he loves her. So
Okay, one thing. You're side by side. Are you guys having
They're together.
Combo question? Okay.
Well, I kind of came into the show late.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I came into the show late, like 2 or 4. Thank God for TNT and the marathons that they run every morning. But what really drew me into the show was the music.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I got my or they recap episodes and they would play Carry On Wayward Son, which always was a perfect theme song.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
What are your feelings on like music? How important it is in the show?
I adore it. It was one of my favorite things about it too. There has never been in the history of television a better use of a song than the use of Renegade. by Styx.
Yeah. Renegade when they were walking
Yeah.
to the car and taking the jack off.
Especially with the pause and we are so screwed, and then kicking it with the song. That was.
Fans will disagree with you, and you always know it's a season finale. Why?
Will and Wayward Son.
Yeah.
Although I actually like the use of Wheel in the Sky in the second season also. I thought that worked nicely too. But yeah, in general, and from everything from, Back in Black when they got the Impala fixed. I Put a Spell on You in the episode with the witches. And that was another one where I saw the script first and it's like, I Put a Spell on You plays on the radio. Oh, please let them get it. Let them actually, because the music was curtailed as the show went on, mainly because of rights issues. That stuff's expensive.
And I think Simple Man too, when they had that one episode where they're kind of showing like the different scenes. I thought that fit really, really well with what they were showing.
And that the classic rock thing it fits in perfectly with the whole feel of the show. Both Dean as a character in particular, and just the whole feel, the whole Midwestern feel of the show in a lot of ways.
Soundtrack.
Yeah.
And in having big orchestral scores as they drive across the heartland,
it just wouldn't work. It fits in with the Impala, with the flannel shirts, with the shotguns, with the ball caps.
Well, there was an episode either this past season or the one before where Sam was giving Dean a really hard time about his cassette collection in the car, and I thought that was hilarious. He's like, "Really? Can't you update anything?" And unless we can't answer any more questions. But if you have a brief comment, we can take it.
I don't think there's ever been a better use of the Gambler, and also I love NPR, and that was awesome.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, tonight we also have something special for you. We have a copy of the book In the Hunt. It is unauthorized essays on Supernatural with an introduction written by Keith. So this is our door prize tonight. If you will look down in front of your chair, there is a little tray that kind of slides out from it's like a little. It's underneath the seat of the chair.
It's like Oprah.
Oh It's a little tray that pulls out that's right underneath the seat. You feel it? How about the top one? They're not the person who put all the stickers. No, I'll tell you what. I'll give you. The panelists are not eligible.
Okay.
I've got. Let me find a brief quote, and you have to me. Okay. I don't have to know when, but this is from this past season. You're the king of rotten. Act like it. Who said it? Yes.
Sam?
No.
No. There you go.
Sorry.
You had a 50-50 shot.
Sorry. Well, it wouldn't necessarily happen.
No, true.
Okay,
I just want to say I've got copies of Nevermore and Bone Key for sale up here if you would like, and some of my other stuff is like Farscape.
Let's give our panelists a hand, please.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Chronic Rift podcast. With any luck, next week we'll be back to normal. Chrissy and Mike will be here, as well as Keith finally settled into his new digs. I'll keep saying it. Head on over to chronicrift.com, or check out the Facebook page. Twitter is chronic_rift. Still don't have that email set up. I don't know what it is. It's just this mental block with me. Maybe right after the show I'll get it done. One last thing really quick. If you haven't had a chance, head on over also to the BatcavePodcast.com, my Batcave 1966 Batman podcast series, where we've been reviewing every episode of Batman 66. My most recent episode, I'm very proud of it, is an interview I did with Dan Greenfield of 13thdimension.com, where we both got to talk with Burt Ward. So that's on over at the BatcavePodcast.com. It'll eventually be in the stream here for the Chronic Rift, but there's a bunch of episodes that we have to get to before that. So folks, thank you once again for listening, and until next time, take care, everybody.